They say time heals all wounds, but in this case it only deepened them. In a remote village near St. Petersburg, 1930, one child's life became an enigma that defied explanation and terrified everyone who crossed her path. This really happened. It was late autumn when travelers first began whispering about the strange girl from Vysotskoye, a crumbling hamlet tucked away in the frozen wilderness of Soviet Russia. Nestled among skeletal birch trees and endless snowfields, the village had been abandoned for decades, save for one family. The Kuznetsovs were poor peasants, eking out a meager existence amidst collectivization policies that stripped their land bare. But what made them infamous wasn't their poverty, it was their daughter Anya. Born in 1917 during the Russian Revolution, she should have been 13 years old by 1930. Yet, villagers swore they saw no change in her appearance since infancy. Her porcelain skin remained flawless, her golden hair shimmered unnaturally under the pale sun. And her eyes, they seemed older than the earth itself. Anya's mother, Yelena Kuznetsov, was a devout woman haunted by guilt. She often whispered prayers to Saint Olga, begging forgiveness for sins she refused to name. "God has cursed us," she'd mutter, as she scrubbed clothes in icy water, glancing nervously at her daughter playing silently nearby. Her father, Ivan, was a stoic man, with calloused hands and a perpetual scowl. He rarely spoke of Anya but kept a loaded rifle propped against the wall at all times. When asked why, he simply grunted, "For protection." Then there was Sergei Volkov, a young teacher sent by the state to educate rural children. Arriving in Vysotskoye in November 1930, Sergei became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind Anya's condition. His notebooks would later serve as the primary source of this retelling. November 5th, 1930, 4:17. PM Sergei noticed something odd on his second day in the village. While teaching basic arithmetic to a group of children huddled around a flickering oil lamp, he overheard two boys arguing about Anya. "She doesn't eat," one boy hissed. "She eats us," the other replied darkly before running off into the woods. That night, unable to shake the comment, Sergei decided to visit the Kuznetsov home. As he approached their dilapidated hut, he heard faint singing, a lullaby sung in a voice too mature for any child. Peering through a cracked window, he saw Anya sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dolls. Except these weren't ordinary toys, they were crudely carved wooden figures missing limbs or painted with grotesque expressions. "What are you doing?" Sergei called softly, startling her. Anya looked up, her wide eyes locking onto his. For a moment he felt as though centuries of sorrow poured into him. Then she smiled sweetly and said, "Waiting. December 1st, 1930, 11:43. PM weeks passed and Sergei grew increasingly unsettled. Strange things began happening around the village, livestock disappearing without a trace, crops wilting overnight, and whispers of shadowy figures lurking just beyond sight. One evening, while walking back to his quarters, Sergei stumbled upon a chilling discovery. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in the schoolhouse, he found dozens of letters written in shaky handwriting. Each letter bore the same plea. "Help us. She isn't human." Before he could react, a cold hand gripped his shoulder. Turning slowly, Sergei came face to face with Anya. Her once innocent smile now twisted into something far more sinister. "You shouldn't have looked," she whispered. The last thing Sergei remembered was the sound of laughter echoing through the empty halls. Some secrets are buried for a reason, but when they resurface, they bring with them more than just answers. They bring nightmares. December 2nd, 1930, 6:45 a.m. Sergei woke up shivering, his breath visible in the frigid air of the schoolhouse. His head throbbed and memories of the previous night were hazy, a blur of laughter, icy fingers gripping his shoulder, and Anya's unnerving smile. He stumbled to his feet, disoriented, only to find himself locked inside the classroom. In the door had been barricaded from the outside with heavy furniture. Panic set in as Sergei pounded on the windows, shouting for help. It wasn't until mid-morning that a passing villager finally heard him and freed him. The man, an elderly farmer, named Dmitri, eyed Sergei suspiciously but said nothing except, "You shouldn't go near the Kuznetsovs again." Back at his quarters, Sergei tried to shake off the encounter, but the letters he'd discovered beneath the floorboards haunted him. They weren't signed, but each one referenced Anya, and not as a child, but as something else entirely. One letter read, "She watches us even when we sleep. No one is safe." Another warned, "Time bends around her. She doesn't age because she isn't alive." As the days passed, Sergei became obsessed with unraveling the truth. He began documenting everything, every strange incident, every whispered rumor about Anya. His journal entries grew frantic, filled with sketches of the wooden dolls and fragmented thoughts about immortality. Meanwhile, the villagers avoided talking about the Kuznetsovs altogether. When pressed, they muttered vague phrases like, "The devil takes what he wants," or "It's better not to ask questions." December 5th, 1930, 8:12 p.m. The strangeness escalated quickly after Sergei's discovery. That evening, while walking home from the village market, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning sharply, he saw no one, but the crunch of snow continued, moving closer. He quickened his pace, heart pounding, but the sound matched his speed. Finally, he spun around, yelling into the darkness. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the moonlight. It was Ivan Kuznetsov, holding his rifle loosely at his side. "You're meddling where you don't belong," Ivan growled, his voice low and menacing. Before Sergei could respond, Ivan vanished into the shadows, leaving Sergei trembling and alone. Later that week, Sergei noticed other eerie occurrences. Objects in his room would be moved slightly overnight. A book turned upside down, a chair pulled away from the table. Once he woke to find one of Anya's carved dolls sitting on his pillow, its painted eyes staring directly at him. When he confronted Yelena Kuznetsov about it, she broke down sobbing. "I've tried to stop her," she confessed. "But she's stronger than us. She knows things." "Know what?" Sergei demanded, but Yelena clammed up, refusing to say another word. December 10th, 1930, 11:47 p.m. By now, Sergei's fear had turned into outright paranoia. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of candlelight felt like a threat. He started sleeping with a knife under his pillow, convinced someone, or something, was watching him. One particularly cold night, unable to sleep, Sergei decided to investigate the woods surrounding Vysotskoye. Armed with a lantern and his journal, he ventured into the dense forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Deep within the woods, he stumbled upon a clearing littered with crude symbols carved into tree trunks. In the center stood a small shrine made of stones, atop which lay offerings of bread, dried flowers, and tiny bones. A sudden rustling drew his attention. Peering through the trees, he saw Anya standing silently, her golden hair glowing faintly in the moonlight. She held something in her hands, a doll, its face twisted into an expression of agony. As if sensing his presence, she turned slowly, her ancient eyes locking onto his. "Why do you follow me?" she asked softly, her voice carrying an unnatural echo. "I need to know who or what you are," Sergei replied, his voice shaking despite his attempt to remain calm. Anya tilted her head, studying him with unsettling curiosity. Then she smiled, a chilling, knowing grin that sent chills down his spine. "You already do," she whispered before disappearing into the shadows. December 12th, 1930, 1:23 a.m. Returning to the village, Sergei found his quarters ransacked. Papers were scattered everywhere, his journal torn apart, pages missing. Among the wreckage, he discovered a single note scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Leave tonight, or you'll join them." Terrified, Sergei packed his belongings and prepared to flee. But as he opened the door, he froze. Standing in the doorway was Ivan Kuznetsov, his face pale and gaunt, his rifle aimed squarely at Sergei. "She told me you'd try to run," Ivan said, his voice hollow. "And she told me exactly How to stop you. Before Sergei could react, a high-pitched giggle echoed from somewhere behind Ivan. Turning his head slightly, Ivan's expression shifted from anger to sheer terror. "Oh, God," he whispered, lowering the rifle. "She's here." From the darkness emerged Anya, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light, and this time she wasn't smiling. In every old house, there's a room no one speaks of. Some say it holds secrets too terrible to face. Others believe it hides something alive. December 12th, 1930, 1:45 a.m. Sergei froze in the doorway, his mind racing as Anya stepped closer. Her movements unnervingly fluid. Ivan backed away, muttering prayers under his breath, but Anya ignored him entirely. Her focus was solely on Sergei. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, her voice layered with an eerie calmness. "Now you'll see what happens to those who ask too many questions." Before Sergei could respond, the world around him seemed to warp. The air grew colder, and shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls of his quarters. Then, with a deafening crack, the floor beneath him gave way. He tumbled into darkness, landing hard on damp earth. Groaning, he pushed himself up and looked around. He was in some kind of underground chamber, a hidden room beneath his quarters. The walls were lined with crude carvings similar to those he'd seen in the forest shrine. Faint symbols glowed faintly in the dim light, pulsating like they had a heartbeat. At the center of the room stood a wooden table covered in strange objects. Jars filled with murky liquid, bundles of herbs, tied with black thread, and more of Anya's grotesque dolls. One doll, however, was different. It bore Sergei's likeness, its painted eyes wide with terror. As Sergei examined the room, fragments of conversations he'd overheard began to piece together in his mind. The villagers' warnings, Yelena's cryptic confessions, Ivan's erratic behavior, all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Anya wasn't just unusual, she was unnatural. Suddenly, he heard footsteps above him. Voices drifted down through the ceiling, Yelena and Ivan arguing in hushed tones. "She's taken control of him," Yelena sobbed. "We can't keep pretending she's our daughter anymore." "She's all we have left," Ivan snapped back. "If we turn against her, she'll destroy us." Their voices trailed off as heavy boots thudded across the floorboards. A moment later, the trapdoor above creaked open, and a figure descended into the hidden room. It was Ivan, holding a lantern that cast flickering shadows across the walls. "Get up," he ordered, his voice trembling. "You've seen enough." But Sergei didn't move. Instead, he pointed at the table. "What is this? What are you doing with these things?" Ivan hesitated, then sighed deeply. It started years ago. When Anya was born, she wasn't normal. She never cried, never aged. At first, we thought it was a blessing, but then people started disappearing. Children, animals, even strangers passing through the village. And every time someone vanished, Anya would bring back one of those. He gestured toward the dolls. December 13th, 1930, 3:17 a.m. Sergei pressed for answers, but Ivan refused to elaborate further. Instead, he led Sergei out of the hidden room and locked the trapdoor behind them. As they emerged into the main living area, Yelena appeared, her face pale and drawn. "We need to leave," she whispered urgently. "She knows you're here. She'll come for you next." Before Sergei could respond, the sound of giggling echoed through the house. Anya stood in the doorway, her golden hair framing her porcelain face like a halo. In her hands, she held another doll, one that looked eerily like Yelena. "Mother," Anya said sweetly, tilting her head. "Why are you so afraid?" Yelena let out a strangled cry and collapsed to her knees. "Please don't hurt us," she begged. Anya smiled, but her eyes remained cold and empty. "I won't hurt you," she said softly. "Not yet." The tension shattered when Ivan grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at Anya. "Run!" he shouted at Sergei. Seizing the opportunity, Sergei bolted out the door and into the freezing night. Behind him, screams erupted from the house, followed by the sound of splintering wood and guttural growls. December 13th, 1930, 4:02 a.m. Sergei didn't stop running until he reached the edge of the village. Gasping for breath, he turned back toward the Kuznetsov home and froze. The house was engulfed in flames, orange light illuminating the snow-covered landscape. Silhouetted against the inferno was Anya, standing perfectly still as if untouched by the chaos around her. Her gaze locked onto Sergei, and though her lips didn't move, her voice rang clearly in his mind. "You can't escape me." Behind, her shadowy figures emerged from the burning wreckage. Not human, but twisted, monstrous shapes that writhed and contorted in impossible ways. They moved in unison, following Anya's lead as she stepped forward. And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the figures vanished into the smoke. But Sergei knew one thing for certain. Anya wasn't done with him, or anyone else. When you dig too deep, sometimes you unearth more than dirt. Sometimes you wake something that should have stayed buried. December 13th, 1930, 5:12 a.m. Sergei stumbled through the frozen wilderness, his breath ragged and his mind reeling. Behind him, the glow of the burning Kuznetsov home faded into the horizon, but the memory of Anya's voice lingered in his thoughts like a curse. "You can't escape me." He reached the edge of the village where the forest loomed dark and impenetrable. His instincts screamed at him to keep moving, yet his legs betrayed him, collapsing beneath the weight of exhaustion. As he lay there, shivering on the icy ground, a chilling realization struck him. Anya wasn't just haunting him, she was hunting him. When dawn broke, Sergei forced himself to rise. He knew he couldn't stay in the open. The villagers would turn him away, or worse, hand him over to whatever force controlled them. Instead, he headed deeper into the woods, seeking refuge in the same clearing where he'd found the shrine days earlier. But this time the clearing was different. The crude symbols carved into the trees seemed fresher, their edges sharp and deliberate. And the stone shrine now bore fresh offerings: a black feather, a shard of broken mirror, and what looked suspiciously like human teeth. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke. Sergei spun around, expecting to see Anya emerge from the shadows. Instead, he found himself face to face with Yelena Kuznetsov, or what remained of her. Her hair was singed, her face streaked with soot, and her eyes hollow with despair. "Yumo, let me live," Yelena whispered hoarsely, "but only to deliver a message. She wants you to know why she chose you." Yelena recounted the events of the fire in a trembling voice. Ivan had tried to fight back using the rifle to destroy one of Anya's dolls, but the act only enraged her. The monstrous figures that emerged from the flames tore Ivan apart before dragging him into the inferno. Yelena herself barely escaped, clutching a single object as she fled, a small leather-bound book. "This is hers," Yelena said, handing the book to Sergei. "It belonged to the woman who cursed us." The journal contained writings in an unfamiliar script, interspersed with sketches of grotesque creatures and rituals. One page stood out: a diagram of a child surrounded by concentric circles labeled with words like anchor and vessel. Beneath it, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Time bends to her will. Death cannot claim her." Before Sergei could ask more questions, Yelena grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Listen to me," she hissed. "Anya isn't just immortal, she's eternal. She existed long before she came to us, and she'll exist long after we're gone. You've been marked, Sergei. She sees something in you, something she needs." At that moment, the temperature plummeted. Frost spread across the ground, crystallizing leaves and grass in seconds. From the trees, a chorus of whispers rose, growing louder until they coalesced into a single, commanding voice. "Come closer." Sergei bolted, dragging Yelena with him. They ran blindly through the forest, branches clawing at their faces and snow crunching underfoot. Behind them, the whispers followed, accompanied by the sound of laughter, high-pitched and childlike, yet wrong in ways that defied description. Finally, they reached a narrow cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. Ducking inside, they huddled together, listening as the sounds outside grew louder. Shadows danced across the entrance, distorted and monstrous. "Tell me everything," Sergei urged Yelena, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who cursed your family? What does she want?" Yelena hesitated, then spoke in halting tones. "Years ago during the famine, Ivan made a deal with a traveler, a woman who promised salvation in exchange for a sacrifice. We didn't understand what we were agreeing to. When Anya was born, we thought she was our miracle. But she wasn't ours. She belonged to her." "The woman in the journal?" Sergei asked. Yelena nodded. "She called herself Mara, a witch, some say. Others claim she was older than time itself. Whatever she was, she gave us Anya and bound her to us. Now Anya feeds on fear, pain, and life itself, and she grows stronger every day." As Yelena finished speaking, the cave fell silent. For a moment, Sergei dared to hope they'd escape detection. Then from the darkness behind them, a soft giggle echoed. "Mother," Anya's voice sang sweetly. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Turning slowly, Sergei saw her standing at the mouth of the cave, silhouetted against the pale, morning light. In her hands she held another doll, this one unmistakably resembling Sergei. Its head lolled limply, its painted eyes wide with terror. "You shouldn't have run," Anya said, stepping forward. "Now I'll have to make sure you never do it again." Before either Sergei or Yelena could react, the walls of the cave began to close in, shifting unnaturally as if alive. Roots snaked through the cracks, binding them in place. And then, with a final, triumphant smile, Anya raised the doll and snapped its neck. December 13th, 1930, 6:47 a.m. The moment Anya snapped the doll's neck, Sergei felt a searing pain shoot through his body. It was as if invisible hands had wrapped around his throat, squeezing the life out of him. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, while Yelena screamed in terror. But the attack stopped abruptly. The pressure lifted, and Sergei found himself staring up at Anya, who now stood over him with an expression of eerie fascination. Her golden hair shimmered unnaturally in the dim light, and her ancient eyes seemed to peer straight into his soul. "You're stronger than the others," she said softly, almost admiringly. "Most would have died already." Yelena lunged at her, desperation fueling her movements. "Leave him alone. Take me instead." Anya simply raised a hand, and Yelena froze mid-motion, suspended in the air like a marionette on invisible strings. Tears streamed down Yelena's face as she struggled against the unseen force holding her captive. "Mother," Anya said, tilting her head, "you've always been so weak, always begging, always crying. But I forgive you." With that, she released Yelena, letting her crumple to the floor. Then, without another word, Anya turned her attention back to Sergei. "You see, Sergei," she began, pacing slowly around him, "I'm not just immortal. I'm eternal. Time bends to my will because I am its anchor. Every moment, every memory, every heartbeat, it all flows through me, and when people die, I keep them. Their essence becomes part of me, trapped forever." She gestured toward the dolls scattered across the cave floor. "These are my treasures. Pieces of those who tried to run, to fight, to understand. They thought they could escape, but no one escapes time." Sergei's mind raced as he tried to process what Anya was saying. She wasn't just a cursed child. She was something far older, far more powerful, a being tied to the very fabric of existence itself. "What do you want from me?" he demanded, his voice shaking despite his effort to sound defiant. Anya knelt beside him, her gaze piercing. "You're special, Sergei. You see patterns where others see chaos. You ask questions even when the answers frighten you. That's why I need you, to help me finish what Mara started." "Mara?" Sergei echoed, recalling the name from Yelena's story. "Yes," Anya replied, her tone darkening. "She gave me life, but she also bound me, made me dependent on fear, on suffering. But you can free me. Together we can break the cycle." Before Sergei could respond, Yelena let out a strangled cry. Don't listen to her. She'll destroy you. Anya's smile faltered for a split second, replaced by a flicker of anger. Be quiet, Mother. No, Yelena shouted, finding strength in her desperation. If you kill him, you'll lose the last piece of humanity you have left. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Anya's face. She hesitated, glancing between Sergei and Yelena, as if torn between two opposing forces within herself. The tension shattered when a low rumble shook the cave. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the walls groaned ominously. Anya's head snapped, up, her eyes widening in alarm. She's here, Anya whispered, her voice trembling. Who? Sergei asked, struggling to sit up. Mara, Anya replied, her usual confidence replaced by raw fear. She's coming for us. As if summoned by her words, a shadowy figure materialized at the entrance of the cave. It was a woman cloaked in tattered black robes, her face obscured by a veil of darkness. Her presence radiated an oppressive energy that made it hard to breathe. So, little Anya, the woman crooned, her voice dripping with malice. You thought you could defy me? Thought you could sever my hold over you? Anya backed away, clutching one of her dolls tightly. I won't let you take me again. Mara laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the cave. Foolish child, you were never meant to be free. You are my creation, my masterpiece. And now, your time has come to an end. With a wave of her hand, Mara sent tendrils of shadow snaking toward Anya. Sergei watched in horror as the tendrils wrapped around her, pulling her toward the witch. In a desperate act, Yelena threw herself between Anya and Mara. Take me instead, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. Let her go! Mara paused, considering. Then, with a cruel smile, she nodded. Very well. A mother's sacrifice. It's fitting. The shadows shifted, enveloping Yelena instead. Her scream echoed through the cave as she dissolved into nothingness. Anya stared in stunned silence, her doll slipping from her grasp. For the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. But before anyone could react further, Mara turned her gaze on Sergei. And you, she purred, stepping closer. What role will you play in this tale? As the shadows closed in, Sergei realized there was nowhere left to run. December 14th, 1930, dawn. The cave was eerily silent when Sergei awoke. His body ached, and his mind felt foggy, as though he'd been pulled from the depths of a nightmare. The oppressive energy that had filled the space was gone, leaving only an empty void in its wake. Anya sat nearby, her golden hair dull and matted, her once ancient eyes now clouded with confusion. She clutched a single doll, the one resembling Yelena, and rocked back and forth, muttering softly under her breath. What happened? Sergei rasped, his voice hoarse. Anya didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her words were barely audible. She's gone. For now. Mara? Sergei asked, struggling to sit up. Anya nodded slowly. Mother saved me. Her sacrifice weakened Mara enough for me to break free. But it won't last. She'll come back. And when she does, her voice trailed off, her gaze dropping to the doll in her hands. Sergei looked around the cave, searching for any sign of Mara or Yelena. The shadowy tendrils, the oppressive aura, they were all gone. Yet, the weight of what had transpired hung heavy in the air. You're still here, Sergei said cautiously. Does that mean you're safe? Anya shook her head. I'm not safe. I'll never be safe. I'm tied to this world, Sergei, to time itself. But now, without Mara's control, I can feel it slipping. The balance is breaking. Over the following weeks, Sergei tried to piece together some semblance of normalcy. He returned to the village, but it was clear that Vysotskoye would never recover. The few remaining villagers avoided him, whispering behind closed doors about the horrors they'd witnessed. Many had already fled, leaving the settlement nearly abandoned. As for Anya, she disappeared shortly after their escape from the cave. One morning, Sergei woke to find her gone, along with the dolls she'd carried everywhere. Only a note remained, scrawled hastily on the back of one of his journal pages. "Thank you for trying to help. Don't look for me. Where I'm going, no one can follow." Despite her warning, Sergei couldn't stop thinking about her. He spent countless nights poring over the leather-bound journal he'd salvaged from the fire, deciphering fragments of Mara's cryptic writings. The more he read, the clearer it became. Anya wasn't just a victim of Mara's curse. She was part of something much larger, something ancient and incomprehensible. His obsession consumed him. Sleep eluded him, and every sound outside his window made him jump, fearing Mara's return. He began seeing things in the shadows, golden hair glinting in the moonlight, wide, hollow eyes watching him from the darkness. By spring, Sergei was a shell of his former self. Villagers whispered that he'd gone mad, haunted by forces beyond understanding. Some even claimed to see Anya wandering the woods at night, her laughter echoing through the trees. Years later, long after Vysotskoye had been reclaimed by nature, tales of the immortal girl spread far beyond Russia's borders. Travelers recounted sightings of a childlike figure with golden hair, appearing in remote villages and disappearing just as suddenly. Others described strange occurrences, missing children, unexplained fires, and eerie carvings etched into tree trunks. Sergei's journals became the primary source for these accounts, passed down through generations like a cautionary tale. Historians debated whether the events truly occurred, or if they were merely urban legends born from collective fear. But those who lived near the ruins of Vysotskoye knew better. Even today, locals refuse to venture too close to the forest surrounding the forgotten village. They say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the faint sound of giggling carried by the wind. And if you're unlucky enough to catch a glimpse of her, you'll notice something unsettling. Her eyes seem older than time itself. April 17th, 1953. Late evening. Decades after the events of 1930, an elderly man sat alone in a dimly lit room, penning the final entry in a weathered notebook. It was Sergei, his hair gray and his hands trembling with age. "I thought I escaped her," he wrote. "But now I realize she was always here, with me, inside me. Every choice I've made, every step I've taken, has led me back to her. Time bends to her will, and so do we." He paused, staring at the page as if expecting it to answer the question burning in his mind. Then, with shaking hands, he added one last line. "If you're reading this, beware. She's closer than you think." The moment he finished writing, the lamp flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, a soft giggle echoed through the room, and then silence. The end.